number of places that you could go to watch television.
True.
And so, so if you were on a local channel in Houston without, before the onset of mass cable availability, the chances are that, maybe 25% of the viewing audience was tuning in because that's what they had available to them. I mean, there's a reason that we will never see another viewing number like the last episode of MASH. The last episode of MASH had something like 1 in 4 Americans watching it. We will never see numbers like that again because nowadays there are 300 cable channels available to every person, plus YouTube, plus, Hulu and Netflix and all your streaming opportunities. Back in the day, while a program might have only been available on their local television channels, they had 4 channels to choose from. So if you were a wrestling fan, you were going to tune in every single week to that one local program. But, Baby Doll, of course, you're from the Dallas-Fort Worth area. Baby Doll comes from a family of wrestling promoters there. She first got hooked up with Gino Hernandez in that area, or wanted to hook up with Gino Hernandez. That was the thing. Connected her to that, and then she went from there to be with Tully Blanchard. And it was great. And I think that we do look at the impact that she had available to her. We look at things like the legacy and legend of the 4 Horsemen, with which she was associated. And I think that a lot of people were watching them. I think that the difference was that at that time, nobody was bragging every week on the internet that 1 million people were watching or 5 million people were watching or whatever. So, I think that there was a lot of opportunities for them.
No, I mean, you're not speaking the wrong facts here. Like, that is actually true. Like, the people still talk to this day about the last episode of MASH and like those, like you said, those numbers, and those numbers will never ever be repeated because of the fact that, like you said, they had 4, 5 stations to really watch, and now they have, like you said, at least 300 if they have cable. And then on top of that, every streaming service you could ever imagine. And then not only that, they might be watching they might have TV on, but are they watching it? I don't know, because they're probably also scrolling on their phone, which means they're watching something on TikTok, Instagram, maybe a Snapchat, maybe YouTube, like anything else on the planet. Like, I mean, I know at one point I've had my laptop open, my phone on, and my TV on. All 3 had wrestling, and on the laptop I had 2 screens. So I was technically watching 4 bits of wrestling at one time, which you can't fully take that in, but you're still watching, like I'm consuming 4 things at one time. Like, that's just not even comparable.
Yeah, it's not. I don't even own a television set. Like, I don't even have a television in my home.
The entire home, you don't own one TV?
Not one TV. I got
That's
rid of
impressive.
I got rid of it at the beginning of COVID. A friend of mine, the first person I ever knew who got COVID, had just moved into an apartment and had to be quarantining for like 2 or 3 weeks. They didn't know at that time. And it's like, oh shit, I was going to go buy a television, and I just took mine. I was like, you know what, I'll bring it to you. I took mine off the wall, drove it to his house, dropped it off, and never bought a new one. So I haven't had a television in my home since the beginning of COVID, whatever that was. And so, and I don't miss it. It was just a space on the wall for me. I barely ever turned it on. Before that, I didn't have cable for like 2 years, so I didn't have any reason to do it unless I was going to plug in my computer to it. So for me, but yet I don't miss a single broadcast of anything I want to watch because there are ways and means to watch everything I need to watch on the internet.
Yeah.
Certainly the most prominent one for me, every Tuesday at 6:05 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, I'm on YouTube watching NWA Power, a new episode.
Love it. That's beautiful marketing. I was going to ask, like, what is it like not having a TV? But like you said, you have everything on your phone. You could literally walk around the whole house, do whatever you were going to do, and then just watch the same thing you were going to watch, but on your phone.
Or my laptop. I stream most of my wrestling on my laptop while I am on my phone.
Right.
So now, it is something that, like, that's one of the reasons, for example, that I think, people express a lot of concern with NWA, like, oh, you don't have a television deal. You don't have, like, that means that you're not a prominent promotion. And I'm like, well, why? Like, we're on YouTube, which is even better. Like, it doesn't matter. How many times have I seen press releases that go out that, oh, now AEW is available on XYZ channel in the UK and in Australia. Well, we don't have that problem. Everybody in the entire world has YouTube, and you can just go, watch it at your leisure or watch it when it premieres Tuesdays at 6:05. NWA Power is available worldwide. And that means that audiences around the world can see me on that show every single week if they choose to. And they don't have to worry about those marketing and broadcast, restrictions.
True. Yeah, the restrictions are far less. And also, like, you might get a couple commercials on a YouTube episode, but when you're watching a live broadcast, like, they have to put it to the point where they put things in picture so you can continue to watch wrestling, but we're also going to sell you something, usually something with Big Pharma. But, even though you're still going to watch some kind of commercial while you're watching the wrestling inside the picture-in-picture.
How can you even watch something that, yes, I know people have big screen TVs and all this stuff, but, like, am I going to, like, focus on the wrestling, or am I going to watch, like, the 90% of the screen? So, yeah, the wonderful thing about what NWA offers, specifically now in our new era that we've been doing since the beginning of this television season, because we still do consider things television seasons. We do TV tapings. We prepare approximately a 44-minute program for people, which is the exact amount of time that you would get of actual video if you're watching television on your television. Just so people know, a 44-minute program is actually an hour-long program with commercials included. So you get to watch, if you're watching our debuts, like when we premiere, you're watching 44 minutes of straight action without having to stop for those 15 minutes of ads.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned that, because a lot of people don't realize that, let's say, you are watching something an hour. Well, you've got 15 minutes at least of commercials that is going to sell you some kind of flashlight or some kind of pill that you probably resonate with, like, half the things that they're saying. But at the same time, like, go over to YouTube, you can watch it whatever you want. You can kind of skip through a bunch of stuff. And, let's say there's a match that you're not completely into. I'm not saying you should skip through it, but you have the option to do said things. So, you can find whatever you want, whatever your highlight of NWA is, you can watch it, and you're good on YouTube.
I don't know what I would do with myself any longer if I had to actually watch anything live and could not fast forward through the parts I don't like. In terms of wrestling, the only program that I watch that I don't do that with is NWA, because I'm watching it when it's premiering, so there's no fast forward option. Not that I ever espouse fast forwarding through any part of NWA, but, like, if there was something that was, like, egregious to me, I would just fast forward through it, which is one of the things when, people are like, oh, I don't like Pollo Del Mar, I'm going to stop watching. I'm like, really? Like, it's on YouTube. Just fast forward through the 2 minutes that you have of it and go back to the rest. It's not really a reliable reason to stop watching something.
I completely agree, and I think people get far bent out of shape out of the dumbest things, and it's like, if you don't like it,
they really do.
Fast forward through it. Like, it's not that big of a deal. Like, in a year from now, are you going to remember that, oh, you didn't like this one segment from this one show? No, you're not. So,
absolutely not.
Next conversation, please. Now, you mentioned way earlier that you are also a writer. Like, what came first for you, your love for writing or your love for performing?
Writing, for sure.
Okay.
Like I said, I've always been, I'm sure that, like, I never even had a realization that I loved performing, because I was just that I was just dramatic and theatrical and all those things as a kid, right? So it was never an idea of performing in that capacity when I was young because it just never occurred to me. But when I was 8 years old, I came home and told my mom I was going to be a journalist. So that definitely was an early onset realization of what the future would hold for me. And then I am so goal driven and motivated and like very focused that from that age onward, doing things that would advance my opportunities to be a writer, to work in journalism, to do all of those things that I had identified so young that I loved was kind of what I did.
Now, obviously, like, I guess the obvious question is to what writers inspired you, but what writer that you read and you were like, I can do this. Like, if this person is saying this, like, I'm having similar thoughts, or I have maybe a different thought that you may have written down and you never thought about, but you're like, I can do this.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the most obvious one, I think, would be to bring to light, like, when I was a child, I had subscriptions to all the wrestling magazines, like every one of them. And so that was certainly, like, reading those magazines was very inspirational to me because I was like, I want to do this someday. And as a child and a young adult, my favorite columnist in Pro Wrestling Illustrated was Eddie Elner. He wrote a column from the perspective of the heel, or sort of like in adulation of heels and their behavior. And I loved that column. And so, many, many, many years later, iterations of that publication and its team in the future, I had my first opportunity to write for Pro Wrestling Illustrated. I contributed an article. And when I was on the phone with Kevin McElvaney, who's the editor-in-chief now of Pro Wrestling Illustrated, I was like, hey, if you ever need anybody to fill the role of Eddie Elner, let me know. I'd love to take over his column. And he laughed and was like, I don't think that's going to happen. And I was like, well, I got to shoot your shot, right? And so about 6 months later, I got an email from Kevin McElvaney and said, hey, been thinking about this. Are you still interested in taking Eddie Elner's column? And of course, I was like, of course, absolutely. And that's how I have my column in Pro Wrestling Illustrated, Pollo Del Mar, on heels, which is obviously a play on many, many elements of who I am and what I do, but it's a heel-focused column, and I've written it out for about a year and a half. I love it. I love that opportunity. I love to play that side of the coin. I get to play that persona that most places I am. I'm that heel manager. So it's a wonderful opportunity. So that was one of the first ones I think that probably comes to mind in terms of journalism specifically.
Yeah, I feel like obviously, like, when we come back to the commentary duo, like, if people want to put Mount Rushmores, which I'm not a fan of because then you have to limit yourself, but like some of the greatest ones, you have that beautiful dynamic of the heel and the face, and you need enough of the heel in there to help the story, but also like give that side of the coin, like you said, because of the fact that, we all want to cheer for the good guy at some point, but there's other times in your life you're like, well, you know what? I think the heel really has a point when it comes to it. Like, they were right throughout this whole thing, and that bad guy or that good guy could actually be the heel in this situation, but they are the good guy. So, I think that side of the coin for the heel needs to be told more. Like, obviously Bobby Heenan did a fantastic job forever. Jerry Lawler did a great job until he was just doing old dad jokes. And then, like, we just have that, like, Corey Graves does a fantastic job now. And even, like, we have Wade Barrett filling that role as well. Like, you have that kind of heel side of it now that you have to tell both sides of the coin, really.
Yeah, absolutely. Otherwise, I think that without that balance there, what ends up happening is you feel overwhelmed by the, I think that even if you want to cheer on the babyface, having somebody there like a cheerleader who's basically
Right.
forcing